Okay, so this is Chapter 11 review. The test will be on Friday, and we have 29 multiple choice questions, and then there's 5 on the map. So it's 34 questions long. On your review sheet it says map is on page 224. Cross that out and put that the map is actually on page 215. Okay, and then the things that you need to know. It's pretty easy for the map. You need to know the Spanish territory, the British territory. So the Spanish territory is basically Florida and then Mexico. The British territory, and that's Canada. You need to know the original colonies, that area, the original United States in 1783. Oregon country, and then the Louisiana Purchase. And they will be labeled, and it's just matching. So that's pretty simple. All right, then I want to go through the actual test with you. So on your review sheet, number 1, what was one of the greatest problems John Adams and the Federalists faced in the election of 1800? And that was Adams' refusal to take the country to war against France. Adams' refusal. So that made Adams very unpopular with the Federalists. Number 2, in the election of 1800, how did Thomas Jefferson win the state of New York? And this was because of Aaron Burr's influence to turn the state to Jefferson. Number 3, where did Thomas Jefferson receive the bulk of his support? And this was from the South and the West, from farmers. Thomas Jefferson, how did he win the House of Representatives? And this eventually became an election where there was ties and ties and ties, and eventually a few Federalists refrained from voting, and that gave the presidency to Thomas Jefferson. Peaceful revolution in 1800. This is an election that is considered a peaceful revolution. Understand that this is because Adams is defeated in an election, and this is the first time in the history of the world that a leader, whether it's a king, whether it's a military dictatorship, whether it's a president, a leader has been asked to step down because of an election. And the guy actually does it. There's fear that maybe he could easily just take over the military and stay. So it's a peaceful changing of the leadership. So that doesn't occur with George Washington because he resigns. He doesn't lose an election, he resigns. Then John Adams. Then Jefferson serves for 2 terms. Then Madison serves for 2 terms. Then Monroe serves for 2 terms. Then John Quincy Adams comes, and John Quincy Adams is defeated by Jackson. So we have 7 presidents, but 2 peaceful revolutions within that, both a father and a son. But by that time, our country is well established, and it's a tradition. But think about that. George Washington voluntarily steps down. Now the second guy comes, he's president for 4 years and loses an election. And everybody comes, well, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Is he going to actually step down? And he does, to his credit. All right, so that's peaceful revolution. Number 6, as president, how did Jefferson stand on political issues change? And that we talked about that. His inconsistency with slavery, his inconsistency with the strict constitutionalist versus loose constitutionalist, the strong government, weak government, and the purchase of Louisiana, the violation of the Constitution. 7, how did Thomas Jefferson, as president, treat the Alien and Sedition Acts? And in this case, he immediately repealed them when he became president, got rid of them. Number 8, who was the Chief Justice on the Supreme Court during President Jefferson's reign or administration? This was who? John Marshall, Judicial Review, Marbury versus Madison. John Marshall was the Supreme Court Chief Justice. What legal precedent was established in the case Madison versus Marbury? This is Judicial Review. Okay? And then, so there's a couple questions about that. Why did Thomas Jefferson, number 10, why did Thomas Jefferson distrust large standing armies? And he thought that they could easily lead to or use to establish a dictatorship. Number 11. Why did Thomas Jefferson see navies as less dangerous than armies? Because navies could not march inland and endanger liberties. Number 12. What did Thomas Jefferson do to guard American shores? And let's see, he constructed a 200 tiny gunboat navy. And they called it the Mosquito Fleet. Number 13, why did Napoleon choose to sell Louisiana to the United States? We just talked about that. It has to do with needing money, needing troops, and the headache that was Santo Domingo and the rebellion that was occurring there. And it was very hard for the French to do anything about that. It was also, something as simple as the yellow fever and mosquitoes that were pestering the French troops. 14. Why was Thomas Jefferson conscience-stricken about the purchase of Louisiana from France? And this has to do with he believed that the purchase was unconstitutional. But you can't pass up pennies per acre. Number 15. What did Aaron Burr do after the duel with Alexander Hamilton? And this is that he plotted to divide the United States in half, and he was going to become king or military ruler of the West. 16. How did Thomas Jefferson deal with the British and the French violations of American neutrality? And he dealt with this by enacting an economic embargo. 17. What effect did Jefferson's foreign policy have on manufacturing in the United States? It increased and stimulated the manufacturing in the United States. Look up Macon's Bill. Macon's Bill is on page 218 in your textbook. It permitted trade with all nations, but promised that if either Britain and France lifted commercial restrictions on American trade, the United States would stop trading with the other. But look that up on page 218. Number 19, we're talking about Tecumseh and the Red Stick Confederacy. He was killed at the Battle of the Thames. Don't get that confused with the Battle of Tippecanoe, but they're both similar. William Henry Harrison is the commander at both of those. The result at the Battle of Tippecanoe was that the dream of an Indian Confederacy died because Tecumseh was killed. What regions supported the War of 1812? The West and the South supported the war. And number 22, what was one of the first lessons learned by the Jeffersonians after the victory in 1800? Now this is kind of, stay with me here, but the answer to that is, it is easier to condemn from the stump than govern consistently. So the stump means from the political campaign trail. And they would chop down a tree and a guy would stand on the stump to give his political speech. And it's easier to be on the outside criticizing those on the inside. It is easier to condemn from the stump than be president. And that is illustrated by Jefferson. When he becomes president, he starts to reverse some of the things that he was so critical of. Okay, so that pretty much concludes the review. For Chapter 11 test would be on Friday.